This is Unforgettable Learning, where we talk to L&D visionaries, experts, and mavericks about performance, creativity, and tech. Subscribe to stay in touch.
In the second part of our conversation with Stella Collins, we're diving into the anatomy of a successful skills experience, what's included, how it worked, and what the results have been. Stella, welcome back.
Thank you very much.
Lovely to have you. So we were sort of priming for this, weren't we? And what we were hoping to talk about is an example of where neuroscience and a learning experience has magically come together and been delivered in a workplace. And that's the dream. If that's happened, we'd love to hear about it. If it hasn't happened, we're also quite curious and interested to see how that has perhaps happened in smaller pieces, given the environmental circumstances that we know of kind of real world workplaces. So maybe you could start by telling us one way you think you've seen real success and just highlight for us that blend between neuroscience and the experience that you created, please.
So I think where we have seen success, and I'm kind of trying to think about this in terms of a client now, rather than, we run our own programs where we have, not complete control, but we have much more control. But when we're working with clients and we're helping them to design and then, maybe run a program internally, or, it's up to them then to continue the journey with their colleagues. You can set everything up to be perfect. You can make sure that the comms are all right so that everybody turns up, on the right day at the right time, thinking, I know what is going to happen. I feel really motivated. I feel really inspired. Of course, in reality, that's not true, because everybody's got, their own job to do. And, well, today's not really great for me because, my child's sick, or, So the reality is there is always something that happens to change the motivations of individuals. What you can do there is, try and work with those and try and help people to feel differently about it, to perhaps even, if they have physically got there, whether it's digital or, face to face, if they physically got there and they are with you, then to really try and tap into, so what is the motivation for you today? What will you get out of this? So not what were the objectives that were published, but what will you personally get out of it, and really help them get there. And I think that's a really important thing. I've seen, programs really change around once you give people that space to say, okay, well, if I'm going to be here anyway, I may as well get something out of it. So that motivation piece is really important. I think one of the big challenges that I find with organizations is asking them to measure impact. We're always saying that what we do, if we follow it through and we take it, to the end, you're never going to get 100% impact. You're never going to get, 100% of the people with the perfect skills by the end of this, or the perfect level of skills by the end of this program. So you're trying to maximize it. You're trying to make sure that you're getting the maximum effect. And one thing you need to do is to actually measure, well, what have you got now and what are you looking for later? So we try to talk with really behavioral measurements. What do you want to be able to see people do? What do you want to hear them say? How do you want them to feel? How do they want to feel? How will the people they work with feel? You could have a whole new set of leaders and they might just really, really upset all their employees, and that would be a bit of disaster. And so by asking those questions, you can tend to get a better level of impact than if you just say, well, what do you want people to do? And they say, well, we want a training course on leadership or communication skills or whatever. So asking those questions, but sometimes that's hard for them to do. And sometimes it's hard for them to measure because they've not measured that. They've not measured it in any tangible way before. So, the way we currently do it kind of in the simplest way is, ask surveys at the beginning, how confident are you? So we did a program with international client, but with their Belgian, kind of through the Belgian connection, was to ask people, how confident do you feel to be able to, and there were a series of kind of communication skills that we'd established these were the challenges they were having in the organization, and they wanted people to share more openly, to not just shut conversations down, but to open them up. So, listen better, ask open questions. So then we rated people rated themselves rather. Now, what you'd really like there would be to have more of a 360 rating where sort of, I'm saying I'm really good at communication skills, but UK to saying, actually, Stella, you're terrible at listening. So, that's something you need to work on, which, could also
Never
help personalize, of course. So trying to track, trying to measure the impact in some way is really valuable, but also thinking about it, I think I said at the beginning of the other session, from a business point of view, what's the impact on this? You could improve everybody's communication skills, but if it doesn't improve anything in the business, if it doesn't mean that there's, less people leaving or fewer people spending time disputing things or, lost orders, whatever it might be. So how can you relate? You have to have a hypothesis. I guess it's using a scientific hypothesis to say, well, okay, you don't know for certain that improved communication skills will improve customer satisfaction, but it's quite a good hypothesis. Let's measure what customer satisfaction is now, and let's measure it after we've done the program. So that measurement is hugely important. That's really hard, I think, to get. And then you've got all the things as you go through. If we use the gear model, some people are going to take that information on really well. And what we always try and do in terms of neuroscience is make that information as varied as possible, so people have multiple ways to access it, so that it's multisensory, because we know that multisensory information ticks more boxes in your brain, so it's going to be easier to remember later on. And providing choices.
Yeah, I love all this, and the barriers that you're identifying, I know, are felt and real. Josh, did you want to speak to this a little bit around sort of your experience of measurement?
I couldn't echo enough sort of the reality check of what the business actually needs, because so often we find our clients on a journey of, well, we want to try and measure the impact of learning, and it kind of turns into the self-fulfilling prophecy of, likability, engagement, vanity metric stuff. You mentioned in our previous session about, investing in a 1-week workshop, and I'll never forget what a client once told me about how they measured the success of a 1-week workshop. And they were kind of saying tongue in cheek, saying, well, of course people love the 1-week workshop. I'd like it too if I got a free lunch and a day off. And, and it was just sort of like, what exactly are you truly measuring? And more importantly, and I love the word hypothesis, Stella, I'm so glad you said it. I find sometimes that you get a deer in the headlight look when you say, well, all learning interventions are essentially a hypothesis. It's a strategic bet on a business outcome that we're trying to impact. And the vulnerability behind saying it's a hypothesis is almost a little bit too much for people, but it is a hypothesis, because we also know how hard it is to isolate the effects of learning on performance. But that doesn't mean we can't necessarily try. And we can't say, of all the different ways to impact this business challenge, learning might be one of the ways to do it. Let's find out more. And if we keep the focus on the business challenge rather than, to your point, sort of the primary or secondary learning skills, knowledge that might be under it, it helps us have tremendous focus. And I think that can be a bold vision for some people, and it's important to help people on their journey there. So just wanted to echo the same sentiments that you're communicating.
You just very sensibly said that, it's one of the features that help. Of course, the Hawthorne effect kicks in, that if you start observing and measuring people, they are likely to improve their performance just because of that. Well, that in itself has value. So, just the measuring has value on its very own, let alone if you actually run something that supports people to change behaviors, habits, and skills. And that is a hard thing to do.
Well, and to even jump on top of that, as you mentioned, even when you come to a place where you actually free people to take control of their learning and say, well, you have no choice but to learn in this scenario or in this situation, might as well make the most of it. That in itself becomes a moment of, well, I'm going to take my learning seriously. I'm going to take ownership of it. The motivation's going to kick in, and you may not get the intended change. I'm doing air quotes now, and I hope that catches on the audio side. You may not get the intended sort of holistic business change, but you will get the change you're looking for. And that is arguably even more important.
Yes, because that might keep the person in the job. It might mean that, you don't lose that person because they were feeling like, I feel frustrated, annoyed, I'm not getting any, I'm not making progress in my role. If I get some learning and I can make it change the way I behave or the things I do, they might stay. Or they might leave, and that might also be equally good,
I often think about the value, certainly, and we're both on the vendor side, but I think of the value of why we do what we do in sort of the big picture of learning in the workplace. And I think so much about how much learning enriches the employee value proposition when it is done well. It is the reason why people stay. It is why the reason why people won't leave. It is that kind of doubling down on it. But all the things that we were talking about today, motivation, habits, doing, that's what people want. They don't necessarily want knowledge. They don't need 5,000 assets that you can access. They want those things, and it's just a refreshing sort of whole point for me of like, what do people actually want? That's going to help them learn. That's going to benefit both them and the organization.
Yeah, and they usually wanted to help them around the people who are most near to them. So if you're a manager and you're leading a team, you want your team to function well, partly because that makes you look good. But you want them to function well because if they're functioning well, that not only reflects well on you, but it actually feels good too. And then, but I think that's really important to think about, that sometimes we're looking at the impact that's too far out. Whereas if you can, as on a personal note, I think it's coming back to what's my personal motivation for this. If I can make sure that Josh, comes into work with a smile on his face every day, as a manager, that's going to be really helpful. With a smile on his face and does the task. But that smile on his face will probably help you do the task.
I would love to continue this conversation. We're going to have to get you back, Stella. I'm really respectful of your time. I know you have a hard stop. I just wondered if you could, in perhaps one sentence, maybe summarize a few tips that you would give for anyone in L&D trying to kind of put together a program of learning. Considering the neuroscience, I know it's a huge ask. They should read the book for one thing, if they haven't already. But what would
read
be your
the book, people?
The core tips.
I think one of the key things is, never do for the learner what they can do for themselves. Don't spoon feed them. Don't baby them, because it's their brains that have to change. So the more that they get choices about what they do, with a focus on, I have a reason for doing this, I think their motivation is hugely important. But then don't do it for them. Let them do the work, because it's their brains who have to change.
Brilliant. And I'm sneaking one last question in. What is unforgettable learning to you?
Something that changes your life, and that can happen in multiple ways. You don't often. I don't think you often get a kind of a light bulb. No, you do get life-changing moments. I think for me, unforgettable learning is the stuff that persists with you, and you just kind of take it. I can tell you an unforgettable learning, and it was when I discovered, so it's a long time ago now, and it's when I discovered accelerated learning, as it was called then. And it was like, this is what I've been looking for forever. And for me, that then really connected with everything I knew. And I'd sort of been studying about the brain and learning, or the brain, more than learning. And then I discovered accelerated learning. It was all about, letting the learner do the work.
Amazing.
So,
Amazing.
So that's stuck.
I love that example. Well, look, we will let you go. It's been absolutely a pleasure having you on
Thank you so much.
podcast. Thank you for all of your sharing and wisdom and knowledge and expertise. And we hope to see you again soon. Thank you.
Thank you all. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Stella. Bye.
Appreciate it, Stella. Take care. Bye-bye.
We hope you've enjoyed this episode. Subscribe to stay up to date with leading lights from L&D and leave us a review to let us know what you think.